The lunchtime rush at Fort Redstone was never a calm affair. The mess hall thrummed like a hive, trays clattering against metal rails, boots thudding across the worn tile, the mingled smells of overcooked broccoli, powdered mashed potatoes, and industrial coffee drifting beneath the high-ceiling fans. Soldiers stood in long lines, fatigues creased but collars open, chatter bouncing off the walls. Someone laughed at a joke 3 tables over. A radio somewhere in the kitchen hissed static between bursts of tinny music. Captain Leah Rain stood behind the serving counter, ladling beef stew into heavy ceramic bowls. The steam fogged the glass sneeze guard in front of her, curling up to dampen her hairline, despite the bun pinned tight at the nape of her neck. The white cafeteria coat over her uniform was spotless except for a faint streak of sauce at the cuff, one she hadn't noticed yet. Her expression, as always, was calm, efficient, unshaken. She moved with mechanical precision. Scoop, pour, slide the bowl down the counter. Scoop, pour, slide. She'd been doing this long enough to know the rhythm. And then his voice broke through. "Afternoon, Captain," called Staff Sergeant Cole Bulldog Mercer, still halfway down the line, but already loud enough for the back row to hear. She didn't look up at first. "Next," she said evenly, filling another bowl. "Or should I say, Head Chef Rains." Mercer went on, voice dripping with the kind of mockery meant to pull an audience in. "Tell me, you serving up orders today? Or just the meatloaf special?" A few soldiers behind him snorted, one of them elbowing his buddy. Leah caught the sound without glancing their way. When Mercer finally reached the front, he set his tray down with a flourish. His forearms rested on the steel counter, the tan skin marked by faded scars and sunburn lines, dog tags jingling softly against his chest. "I'll take the stew," he said, "but maybe skip the advice on security drills this time, huh? We all heard you earlier in the break room, telling Corporal Diaz how the base should run the lockdown. Cute, but maybe leave that to the people who actually wear a rifle." The soldiers clustered behind him laughed outright now. One private muttered, "Guess the only thing she's good at unlocking is the freezer." Leah's ladle hovered in midair. She turned her eyes on Mercer, meeting his gaze without a flicker of a smile. "You here to eat, Mercer?" she asked quietly. "Or just to perform?" That earned a few surprised chuckles from the younger privates, but Mercer leaned in, refusing to let her have the last word. "You know the real problem, Rains?" His voice dropped, more intimate now, but pitched so the people nearby could still catch every syllable. "You've been stuck behind this counter so long, you've started thinking it's a command post. But out here," he gestured vaguely toward the mess hall and beyond, "this is the real army. We follow orders. We take risks. We don't play soldier in a kitchen." Silence rippled outward from the counter, swallowing the hum of conversation. Leah could feel eyes on her from all directions, weighing whether she'd bite back or let it slide. She set the ladle down slowly, deliberately. Her tone was steady, but the air between them felt taut enough to snap. "Here's your stew," she said, sliding the bowl toward him. "Careful. It's hot. Wouldn't want you burning your tongue before you have another chance to talk." A couple of soldiers tried to smother their grins. Mercer's smirk twitched, but before he could fire back, the cafeteria doors slammed open. A corporal stumbled inside, breathless, a streak of dust across his cheek. "All personnel, red protocol, Sector 9. Repeat, red protocol, Sector 9. The overhead speakers came alive a second later, the calm but clipped voice of the base intercom echoing the order. Red protocol wasn't a drill you ignored. It was a highest security alert short of an active combat breach. The mess hall erupted into motion. Soldiers pushed back chairs, dumped trays, and headed for the exits in tight formation. Boots pounded the floor. The air shifted, lunch chatter replaced by an electric, humming urgency. Mercer's grin came back, though thinner this time. "Guess they won't need the lunch lady for this one." Leah didn't answer him. Her eyes were fixed on the far wall, where a small, rectangular panel above the east wing double doors blinked with a pulsing red light. It wasn't part of the general alert system. That light was specific. She knew it. Few others would. That panel meant a sector lockdown. And that hallway beyond the doors? It led directly to Sector 9. Buried in Sector 9 was a single reinforced door that never appeared on public schematics. Door 13, the most secure access point on the entire installation. Her stomach knotted. She hadn't seen that light in years. Not since Rains. Mercer's voice snapped her focus back. He'd stepped around the counter now, as if to emphasize his authority. All non-essential personnel stay put. That means you. Keep the kitchen running for whoever's left. All non-essential personnel are to remain in place. The intercom confirmed almost instantly, as though mocking her thoughts. Security teams to Sector 9 immediately. The blinking light kept pulsing, steady as a heartbeat. The last of the soldiers filed out, leaving only a few junior kitchen staff hovering uncertainly by the dishwashers. Someone dropped a tray into the soapy water with a metallic crash. Mercer hesitated at the door, glancing back. "Don't get any ideas, Captain. That door's not for people like you." The words landed harder than she expected. Not because they were new, but because they were deliberate. He wanted her to feel small, to stay small. When the door shut behind him, the mess hall fell into near silence. Only the faint hum of refrigeration units and the beeping panel broke it. Leah's hands tightened around the edge of the counter until her fingertips ached. If her instincts were right, the alert wasn't about some random drill gone wrong. Someone had made a move, the kind that could unravel everything she tried to bury. She straightened slowly, eyes still on that blinking light. They thought she was here to serve meals. They thought she had no business anywhere near Sector 9. They were wrong. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The mess hall felt unnaturally large now that the midday crowd had cleared out. Without the constant roar of soldiers talking over one another, the space echoed in strange ways. The squeak of a mop bucket wheel from the far corner, the faint hum of the soda dispenser, the distant, muffled shouts from somewhere deeper in the base. Leah wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the blinking panel above the east wing doors again. The pulse of red was slower now, steady and unrelenting. Most people wouldn't even notice it. They'd be too busy watching the main alert screens or following orders to shelter. She noticed. She always noticed. Behind her, young Private Amy Lutz emerged from the kitchen, holding a stack of clean trays. "Captain, you want me to—" She stopped, following Leah's gaze toward the east wing. "Is that—" "Nothing you need to worry about," Leah said, sharper than she intended. Lutz hesitated, then shrugged and disappeared back into the dish room. The room settled into a kind of low-tide quiet. Everything sluggish after the rush. But Leah's nerves were humming. She could feel the alert's gravity, even from here, like a pressure change in the air. That's when she heard them, voices low, urgent, coming from the far side of the mess hall near the vending machines. Two men in olive drab uniforms stood half in shadow, their heads close together. Their voices carried just enough for her to catch fragments. Door 13's in lockdown. Clearance list is 4 names, and she's not one of them. Still say it's a mistake. No one gets through that door. The words curled around her like smoke. She kept her head down, busying herself with the stack of trays Lutz had left, but her ears tracked every syllable. One of the men, a tall lieutenant with close-cropped hair, rubbed the back of his neck. If they can't bypass the first lock, they're dead in the water. And you know it's not just steel behind that door. It's his companion, a stockier man in captain's bars, shot him a sharp look. "Not here. We don't talk about it here." Leah's pulse ticked up a notch. The stocky one glanced toward the kitchen, toward her, and she immediately bent to adjust the tray stack, making herself look as harmless and busy as possible. They moved toward the exit, boots squeaking softly against the tile. She waited until the door shut behind them before straightening. Her eyes drifted back to the blinking panel. Door 13. She hadn't heard those words in, God, it had to be 6 years. And hearing them now, like that, was like catching a scent you thought you'd forgotten, one that dragged up images whether you wanted them or not. She forced her mind away from the memories. Focus. She slipped into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind her. The space smelled of dish soap and yesterday's grease. Lutz was bent over the sink, scrubbing, earbuds in. The radio in the corner sputtered static before catching on a news brief. Nothing about the alert, just a bland weather report. Leah crossed to the back counter and pulled out an old, battered recipe box. The thing looked like it had been through a small fire at some point. The corners charred, the latch bent. She'd kept it hidden behind bulk sugar bags for years. She flipped the latch and eased the lid open. Nestled between yellowing recipe cards was a folded sheet of paper, the edges softened by time. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a schematic of Fort Redstone from an older era, back when the base had different designations for its sectors. Most of these diagrams were outdated, irrelevant, except for one thing, a faint pencil mark. So light it was almost invisible unless you knew where to look, circled a spot deep inside the east wing sublevels. It was labeled with nothing but a number, 13. Her finger rested over the mark for a moment. Footsteps echoed in the hall outside. She folded the paper quickly, slid it back into the box, and shoved the box under a pile of linen aprons. The kitchen door banged open. Mercer stepped in, his presence filling the narrow room. Well, hiding back here while the grown-ups handled the problem? Leah didn't look up. Just doing my job. You hear that announcement? Sector 9. That's serious business. You ever been down there? His tone was mocking, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. Once or twice, she said. His brows rose. Really? What delivering coffee? Her jaw tightened. She busied herself wiping an already clean countertop. Something like that. Mercer leaned against the counter opposite her, crossing his arms. You know, I almost feel sorry for you. Stuck in here while the rest of us actually do something when the alarm goes off. She looked up then, meeting his gaze. And what exactly are you doing, Mercer? Besides hanging around my kitchen? His mouth opened, but before he could answer, the intercom crackled again. Red protocol remains in effect. All security personnel, report status to command. Mercer pushed off the counter. See? That's my cue. Try not to burn the bread rolls. He left, the door swinging closed in his wake. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence before a storm. Leah exhaled slowly, then reached for the dish towel again. More to give her hand something to do then, because the counter needed wiping. She couldn't shake the sound of the lieutenant's voice. For names, she's not one of them. He was right. Officially, she wasn't. But there were ways around official. And if someone was trying to open door 13 for the wrong reasons, the real mistake would be sitting back and letting them try. The mess hall felt wrong when it was empty. Without the pounding chatter and the constant shuffle of boots, every sound seemed exaggerated. The squeak of a mop bucket's wheel from somewhere in the back, the hiss of the soda dispenser resetting, the faint rattle of a loose vent cover overhead. Even the overhead lights hummed too loudly, a high electrical whine Leah could feel in her teeth. The blinking red panel above the east wing doors drew her eyes again and again, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. The pulse was slower now, methodical. To anyone else it might look like just another part of the wall, but she knew that light. She remembered it in the way you remember the shape of an old scar, the color, the rhythm, the way it meant trouble of the sort most soldiers on this base would never know. She stacked trays at the counter, moving mechanically, but her attention wasn't on her hands. Captain? She turned. Private Amy Lutz stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a stack of clean trays. She was barely 20, with a dusting of flour still on her forearm from the morning's bread prep. What's with the light? Lutz asked, nodding toward the east wing. Leah's voice came sharper than intended. It's nothing you need to worry about. Lutz raised her eyebrows, but didn't push. Okay, want me to start on the coffee urns? Go ahead. The younger woman disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Leah alone with the silence and the red pulse. Somewhere across the room, the vending machines whirred. That's when she heard them. Voices. Low, urgent, coming from the shadowed corner by the far wall. 2 officers, heads bent close. Door 13's in lockdown. One murmured, his voice clipped tense. Her stomach tightened. Only 4 names on the clearance list. The other said, 4, and she's not one of them. Still say it's a mistake. No one gets through that door. Not here. The second officer snapped. "We don't talk about it here." They cast quick glances around the room. Leah bent over the tray stack, rearranging them like she was fussing with the weight, but her ears stayed tuned to every word. The taller of the two, a lieutenant with close-cropped hair and deep worry lines across his forehead, rubbed the back of his neck. If they can't bypass the first lock, they're dead in the water. And you know it's not just steel behind that door. It's... The other officer, stocky and broad, cut him off with a hiss. Enough. Leah lowered her gaze, keeping her movements casual as they strode toward the exit. The door shut behind them. Her hands tightened on the top tray until her knuckles whitened. Door 13. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, but hearing it now was like a jolt of cold water down her spine. She turned and walked quickly into the kitchen, pushing the swinging door with her hip. The air inside was heavy with the smells of dish soap, steam, and old grease. Lutz was at the sink, earbuds in, scrubbing furiously at a roasting pan. The radio in the corner was sputtering static before it caught a weak signal, something about a low-pressure system moving in over the coast. Leah crossed to the far back shelf and pulled a battered recipe box from behind a sack of sugar. It was an ugly little thing, the metal warped and the corners slightly charred from a fire years ago. She flicked the latch open with her thumb. Inside, nestled between yellowed recipe cards for biscuits, chili, and chicken pot pie, was a folded sheet of paper. She slid it free with careful fingers. It was an old schematic of Fort Redstone, back from before the renovations, when the base was divided into its original sector numbers. Most people would see nothing useful here, but in the lower right quadrant, faint as ghost ink, was a pencil circle around a blank section a hallway deep in the east wing sublevels. Next to it, written in tiny block letters, was a single number, 13. She traced it lightly with her fingertip. Footsteps in the hall. She folded the paper quickly, slid it back into box, and shoved the whole thing under a pile of linen aprons. The door banged open. Mercer. He filled the doorway like he owned it, arms braced against the frame. Well, hiding back here while the grown-ups handled the problem? Leah didn't look up. Just doing my job. You hear the announcement? Sector 9. He stepped inside, his boots leaving wet marks on the tile. That's serious. You ever been down there? Her eyes stayed on the cutting board she was wiping. Once or twice. His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Really? What, delivering coffee? She let the silence hang until it was almost awkward. Something like that. He smirked, leaning his hip against the counter. You know, I almost feel sorry for you. All these years on base, and the closest you come to action is stirring the soup. Is that what you call what you were doing in the mess hall? She said, glancing at him finally. Action? His smirk faltered for half a second before he straightened. The intercom crackled to life overhead. Red protocol remains in effect. All security personnel, report status to command. Mercer jerked his chin toward the ceiling. That's my cue. Try not to burn the bread rolls. He left without waiting for a response. The swinging door closed behind him, and the quiet that settled wasn't comfortable. It was thick, heavy, the kind of quiet before something breaks. Leah stood there, staring at the place where the recipe box had been moments earlier. She thought about the lieutenant's words. Only 4 names. She's not one of them. Officially, no, but official didn't always matter. She exhaled slowly, the decision forming in her mind before she'd fully acknowledged it. If someone was trying to open door 13, the real mistake would be letting them try. By the time the sun began to dip low behind the distant hills, Fort Redstone's mess hall had taken on a strange, hollow quiet. The lockdown in Sector 9 was still active, and the usual evening rush never came. The smell of the day's cooking lingered faintly. Overcooked broccoli, baked chicken, a hint of burnt coffee. But without the crowd, it just hung in the air like a stale memory. Leah moved methodically, her motions neat and measured as she stacked silverware into trays and refilled the napkin dispensers. She looked like someone calmly closing up for the night, but inside her mind, thoughts paced like caged animals. She couldn't stop hearing those overheard words from earlier. Door 13's in lockdown. For names, she's not one of them. The cafeteria clock ticked too loud in the silence. Lutz had been sent home. The junior kitchen staff released early because there was hardly anyone left to feed. It was just Leah now, moving alone in the dimming light. Eventually, she stripped off her green apron, folded it on the counter, and slipped into the back hallway toward her office. Her office wasn't much. A converted storage room with peeling cream paint and a single buzzing fluorescent light overhead. The desk was narrow, the filing cabinet dented. The only personal touch, a small potted plant on the sill that she half suspected was plastic. She closed the door behind her, the latch making a small, decisive click. Then she went to the bottom drawer of the desk. The key was tucked in her apron pocket. A simple, outdated push key, the kind anyone with basic lock-picking skills could open in under 10 seconds. She didn't bother with the thought. She turned the lock, slid the drawer open, and reached for the plain, weathered folder inside. No markings, no labels, just worn cardboard soft at the edges. She opened it slowly, her fingers lingering on the first page. It was a photograph, grainy, black and white, printed from an old surveillance feed. It showed a corridor of reinforced concrete walls, ending at a narrow steel door. No sign, no label. Just a dull gunmetal slab with the number 13 stenciled at knee height. For a moment, the office around her faded. She was back there, in that corridor, 6 years ago. The air had been cold enough to bite. Her breath had fogged in front of her face as she knelt by the panel. She'd been younger then, with tighter posture and a sharper kind of energy coiled in her muscles. Her CO's voice had been low, but steady in her ear. "Raines, you're on point. Breach in under 60 seconds. The pouch in her hands had been leather, worn from years of use. Inside, her tools. Slim, precise, tailored for the job. She remembered the satisfying way of the tension wrench in her palm, the metallic click as she bypassed the first mechanism. Her fingertips had known the sequence before her mind did. Pull, strip, loop, connect. The keypad had gone dark. The mechanical bolts had released with a deep, resonant clunk that she could feel in her bones. The door had swung inward. The darkness beyond was heavier than air. They'd gone inside, their footfalls muffled on the smooth floor. It had gone perfectly, until it hadn't. The gunshot had been deafening in that enclosed space. The body had hit the floor before she'd fully processed who had fired. The rest was a blur. The mission had been declared contained, but her clearance had been revoked within a week. No explanation, just a desk job, then a reassignment to mess hall duties. Leah blinked back to the present, the hum of the fluorescent light replacing the echo of that gunshot. She slid the photograph back into the folder, but the image of the door didn't fade from her mind. It never did. Pushing back from the desk, she rubbed her temples, staring up at the ceiling. The voices from earlier replayed like a stuck recording. 4 names. She's not one of them. No, she wasn't. Not anymore. But those 4 names weren't the only ones who could open door 13. A faint sound pulled her out of her thoughts. A soft scrape from outside her office door. She froze, listening. Nothing. Quietly, she stood and crossed the small room. She turned the knob slowly, easing the door open a few inches. The corridor was empty, lit only by the dim wall sconces. The air was still, the only sound the steady hum of the ventilation system. She stepped into the hallway. That's when she saw it. A small, folded square of paper lying just inside the doorframe, as if it had been slid under while she was inside. She crouched, picked it up. The paper was thin, slightly rough to the touch, like it had been torn from a notebook. Unfolding it, she found 5 words in precise, blocky handwriting. "They're opening door 13 tomorrow. Don't let them." Her pulse hit hard, a fast, heavy thud in her chest. She read it again, slower this time. Someone knew she'd understand. Someone had chosen her. The note had no signature, no mark, no clue of who had left it. But that wasn't what rattled her the most. What rattled her was the absolute certainty in those words, as if whoever had written them believed she was the only one who could stop it. Her gaze swept the hallway again. Empty. Whoever had delivered it was gone. She folded the paper once, then again, and slid it into her breast pocket. Her hands flexed at her sides, restless, like they used before a breach. She'd promised herself years ago she'd never go near that door again, that she'd stay buried in the safe monotony of cafeteria life, that she'd keep her head down, out of chain of command, out of missions where choices cost lives. But this wasn't just about her. If that door was open for the wrong reason, if whatever was behind it was taken, the damage wouldn't stop at Fort Redstone. It could spread far beyond these walls. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, the sound suddenly louder in the stillness. She took a slow breath. Tomorrow, everything might change, and she wouldn't be standing behind a serving counter when it did. The morning broke under a flat, gray sky, the kind that made the whole base feel like it was holding its breath. Leah hadn't slept. She'd sat on the edge of her bed half the night with a folded note on her desk. Its blocky handwriting burned into her mind. They're opening door 13 tomorrow. Don't let them. Now, tomorrow had arrived. She was in the mess hall before reveille finished echoing over the parade ground, the fluorescent lights still flickering to life. The place smelled faintly of bleach and yesterday's coffee grounds. She unlocked the kitchen door, tied on her apron, and set to work like it was any other day, even though every movement felt too loud in the silence. By 0600, the first wave of soldiers had filed in for breakfast, their boots wet from dew, faces half awake. The usual banter was subdued. Sector 9's lockdown was still in effect after running through the night, a first in Leah's memory. Private Lutz came in looking rumpled and eager to gossip. "Morning, Captain." She hefted a 50-pound bag of flour onto the counter and, after a beat, nodded toward the east wing doors. Still blinking red. "You think they'll lift it?" Leah poured scrambled eggs onto the griddle. "They'll tell us when they do." The PA system crackled overhead, the calm female voice announcing, "Base-wide schedule adjustment. Command inspection begins at 0930. All sectors restricted to essential personnel. Mess continues on normal schedule." Let's frown. Inspection? In the middle of a lockdown? "Sometimes Command likes to look at the mess while it's still messy," Leah said, flipping the eggs. Inside, her pulse ticked faster. At 0928, the inspection entourage swept in. A harried major, a clipboard-carrying liaison, and Brigadier General Hartley himself, all squared edges and cold eyes. MPs flanked them like armored punctuation marks. Mercer intercepted them halfway to the coffee urns. "Sir," he barked, posture perfect. He glanced at Leah as if to remind her of her place. "I'm in their conversation. You're pouring their coffee." Hartley didn't even slow. "Sector 9 status?" The liaison answered quickly. "Unchanged. Breach vector isolated to Sublevel B's network, but the fail-safes aren't failing safe," Hartley finished. His eyes flicked briefly over the mess hall before shifting to the east wing doors. "The commander?" "In Sector 9 with the delegation," the liaison said. Leah kept her gaze on the tray of toast, but she felt Hartley's eyes skim over her like a scan. He registered cafeteria and dismissed her in the same breath. The entourage moved on, disappearing into the east wing with the doors sealing behind them. By mid-morning, the mess hall was unusually empty. The first breakfast wave had left for duties, and the second hadn't yet arrived. Leah found herself wiping the same patch of stainless steel over and over, listening for anything unusual. The PA broke the quiet. "Attention! Localized systems cascade in Sublevel B. Sector 9 remains in red protocol. MP units to choke points Echo and Foxtrot. All non-essential personnel hold in place." Her hands froze mid-wipe. Mercer strode in from the east hallway, radio crackling at his shoulder. "We're locking traffic through here." "You too." He nodded at Leah and Lutz. "Keep serving for anyone who comes through. Stay out of the east wing." "Not a suggestion." Leah's tone was even. "Any word on the commander?" "Not for your ears." Mercer shot back. The wall-mounted mess hall radio suddenly came alive with a channel it shouldn't have picked up. Hartley's voice came through, faintly muffled by distance. "Mechanical, electronics dead. Holding at Sub-B Corridor 5. Blast doors intact. But the secondary interlocks tripped. If we can't vent the section, we're cooking ourselves in our own caution." Another voice, younger, tense, broken. "Manual egress to motor pool tunnel is sealed." Only a 13 key. Don't say the number. Hartley snapped. Say, door. Leah's stomach nodded. The door was door 13. The radio spat static. Then another voice cut in, urgent. We got heat signatures moving in the service shaft behind the fuel room. 2, maybe 3. Not ours. Mercer stiffened in the doorway. You hear that? Leah's eyes stayed on him. We have ears. His jaw twitched. Stay put. But she saw something shift behind his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. The radio hissed again. Hartley's voice was closer now. 5 inside this corridor. Temperatures climbing. Comms patchy. We need hands and a key we don't have. Leah didn't break eye contact with Mercer. For a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not hostility, but recognition. He didn't know what she knew, but he knew she knew something. Lutz, Leah said quietly. Pull the emergency rations and water jugs. Stage them by the far door. If teams come through, they'll need them. Lutz hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Mercer stepped closer, lowering his voice. Rains. She matched his tone. Do your job. Let me do mine. Before he could reply, his radio barked his name twice. Urgent. He turned away, muttering stay, and jogged for the east wing. As soon as he was gone, Leah moved. She slipped into the back storage room and closed the door. The recipe box was still buried under aprons and flour sacks. She slid it out, unlatched it, and lifted the false bottom. Inside was a compact roll of tools, narrow picks, a tension wrench, a bypass hook. Nothing dramatic, but everything she'd need. She tucked the roll into her apron pocket and went to the small service door at the rear dry storage. It opened into a narrow maintenance corridor that paralleled the main east wing hallway. Few people used it except janitors and repair crews. She paused, listening. The hum of ventilation, the faint echo of footsteps far ahead, the muffled wail of a distant alarm. She started forward, her pace steady, her heartbeat anything but. Every step was a decision she couldn't take back. Somewhere in Sector 9, people were trapped, time was running out, and someone, maybe more than one, was moving toward door 13 with intentions she didn't want to imagine. And Leah Raines, officially non-essential, was walking straight toward them. The maintenance corridor was dim and narrow, the overhead bulbs spaced too far apart, making pockets of shadow that swallowed her boots as she moved. The air was cooler here, tinged with a faint metallic smell of old ductwork and disinfectant. Leah's breath was steady, but her chest felt tight, not from exertion, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She had walked corridors like this before, years ago, but then she had clearance, a team, and orders. Now, she had none of those. Only the folded note in her pocket and the tools in her apron. She rounded a corner and slowed. Ahead, the maintenance hall merged into the main east wing passageway. 2 armed MPs stood in front of a reinforced blast door, the only entry point into the Sector 9 sublevels from this side. Their rifles hung ready but relaxed, their posture not so much. Leah pulled herself taller and stepped out of the shadows into the light of the main hall. One MP spotted her immediately. Ma'am, this area is restricted. You need to turn around. I need to get through, she said, calm but firm. The other MP glanced at her apron and gave a half smile. Mess hall's back that way. I'm aware, she said evenly. Now step aside. The first MP frowned. No clearance, no entry. Those are standing orders. Leah reached into her pocket and pulled out the rolled tools, letting the canvas unfurl just enough of the gleam of metal to catch the light. If you keep me out, you're wasting time people in there don't have. Before they could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from behind the blast door. It slid open just far enough for Staff Sergeant Mercer to step through, sweat beading on his temple. His eyes widened when he saw her. Raines, what the hell are you doing here? Getting to the door, she said. You're not. Save it. She cut in. I can open it. The MPs exchanged glances. Mercer's jaw worked like he was chewing on the decision. You so much as scratched that lock. It won't be the lock you need to worry about, she said, already moving past him into the sublevel corridor. He followed, muttering curses under his breath. But she didn't slow. The hallway stretched long and sterile, with overhead pipes wrapped in aging insulation and the low rumble of ventilation units struggling against the lockdown. They passed security station where a corporal sat hunched over a dead terminal, slapping the side of the monitor like it might wake up. "Systems are shot," he told Mercer without looking at Leah. "Electronic overrides dead. Commander's still trapped past Corridor 5. Mercer gestured toward Leah. "She says she can get it open." The corporal blinked up at her, then at the apron, with, "What?" "A spatula." Leah ignored him and kept walking. By the time they reached the junction, the air was warmer, heavy. The sound of voices echoed faintly from down one of the side corridors, but Mercer guided her toward the opposite hall, a narrow, dim-lit stretch that ended in a steel door. Even from a distance, she recognized it instantly. Door 13. It was exactly as she remembered, unmarked except for the stenciled number low on its surface, framed by reinforced concrete, with a recessed keypad and card reader sitting dead in the wall beside it. 2 more guards flanked the door, their expressions taut. One held a clipboard, checking and rechecking something on a printed roster. "If your name isn't here," he told Mercer, "you're not." "She's with me," Mercer interrupted. The guard looked her over slowly. "Who is she?" "The person who's going to open that door," Mercer said before she could answer. The guard's brow furrowed. "You're kidding. No one without clearance." Leah stepped forward. "Do you want this open, or do you want to keep having this conversation?" For a moment, no one moved. The air was thick with the low hum of the ventilation system and the faint hiss of the keypad's idle mode. Mercer broke the stalemate. "Move." Reluctantly, the guard stepped aside. Leah dropped to one knee in front of the keypad, unrolling her tools in a neat line on the floor. She ran her fingers over the panel seams, feeling for imperfections, checking the screws, the housing, the way the metal met the frame. Behind her, the guards muttered under their breath. "This is insane," one whispered. "She's wasting time," the other replied. Mercer cut them both a look that shut them up. Leah selected a slim flat pick and slipped it into the maintenance latch at the base of the keypad housing. A quick twist, a slide upward, and the casing popped free, revealing the inert wiring beneath. She reached for the tension wrench, her hands moving with the precision of someone who had done this under worse conditions. Every connection was muscle memory. Bypass the power feed, reset the internal latch, trip the manual override pins in the correct sequence. It wasn't fast. It wasn't meant to be. This wasn't a cheap padlock. This was a multi-layer mechanical-electronic hybrid built to stall even an expert, but it had been built years ago, and she'd learned on this model. "Halfway," she murmured to herself, sliding the last pin into place. The keypad lit briefly, a faint, flickering glow, before dying again. The guards shifted, impatient. Mercer stood still, his eyes never leaving her hands. She swapped tools without hesitation, pulling the bypass hook and sliding it into the manual bolt slot hidden behind the frame. One twist, 2 clicks, and the deep, resonant clunk of disengaging locks echoed down the hall. The door shifted, just enough to breathe. "That's one," she said. "One," one guard repeated. Leah stood, wiping her palms on her apron. "There's a second lock, mechanical, inside the housing." She stepped into the narrow recess, pulling a different pick from her roll. This one was heavier, designed for torque. She slid it into the hidden slot, fell for the tumblers, and began the delicate dance of pressure and release. The hallway had gone dead quiet. Even the guards had stopped shuffling. One tumbler clicked, then another, then another. Her pulse matched the rhythm. Click, pause, click, pause. The 4th tumbler stuck. She adjusted pressure, eased back, then pressed again until... click. She withdrew the pick, pressed a release lever, and the final lock gave way. The door opened an inch on its own, the air rushing out in a warm, stale breath. From beyond came voices, faint but urgent. Leah stepped back, gesturing for the guards. "It's open." Mercer exhaled, almost a laugh. "Hell." The guards pulled the door wide. Inside, the corridor beyond glowed with emergency lighting, and the commander's voice carried back. "About damn time." As the first rescue team moved through, one of the guards shot her a look somewhere between disbelief and respect. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Leah didn't answer. She knelt, rolling her tools back into their case, each piece sliding into place with quiet precision. Mercer crouched beside her. You've been hiding that for a long time. Not hiding, she said softly. Just not using it. He studied her for a beat. I was wrong about you. She stood, meeting his gaze. Yes, you were. From inside the corridor, a shout went up. The trapped delegation was being escorted out, the commander among them. Hartley emerged a moment later, his uniform damp with sweat, his expression carved in stone. His eyes went to the open door, then to Leah. You, he said. With me? The corridor beyond door 13 smelled of heat and confinement. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen, sweat, and the faint ozone of stress electronics. Red emergency lights pulsed in slow, deliberate intervals along the ceiling, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. Hartley moved with the controlled force a man used to commanding chaos. He didn't look back to see if Leah followed. He knew she would. Mercer trailed behind her, silent for once, his earlier skepticism tempered by the sight of her bypassing the door in under 5 minutes. They reached an intersection where a small medical team was tending to the commander and the delegation, pale-faced men and women in tailored uniforms, their jackets damp with perspiration, water bottles pressed into their hands. Hartley stopped abruptly and turned to Leah. You, with me. His voice was low but unyielding. Leah followed him down a narrower side corridor until they reached a small security antechamber. A single table sat in the center, a chair on either side. Hartley took the far seat, gesturing for her to sit opposite. Mercer started to follow, but Hartley raised a hand without looking. Outside, the door shut, leaving just the two of them. Hartley leaned forward, forearms resting on the table. You want to tell me how a cafeteria captain just unlocked the door only 4 people on this base have clearance for? Leah kept her gaze steady. You needed it open. I opened it. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting unless you start asking the right questions, she said. Hartley's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something, maybe respect, maybe irritation, crossing his face. Fine. Where did you learn that bypass? In the field. What field? You're not in any current operational roster. You haven't been for years. She didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, thick and deliberate. Hartley finally sat back, studying her like she was a weapon someone had left lying around without telling him what it could do. You've been here how long? 4 years in the mess hall. 3 in logistics before that. And before that, Leah didn't move, didn't blink. Before that is why I could open your door. Hartley's gaze sharpened. That skill set doesn't just happen. You were attached to a covert unit. I was attached to a lot of things. His jaw flexed. Why are you here, Rains? Why hide in the kitchen? Because kitchens don't get people killed, she said quietly. The words hung between them like a live wire. For a moment, Hartley didn't speak. Then he exhaled slowly. I'm not going to pretend I care about your personal reasons. What I care about is that the breach into Sector 9 wasn't random. Someone was moving toward that door, and they knew exactly what was on the other side. Leah's pulse ticked faster. What is on the other side right now? Hartley studied her a moment longer, then stood. You're about to find out. He led her out of the antechamber and down another hallway, this one lined with reinforced doors on either side. The red lights overhead made the shadows seem deeper, more solid. At the end of the hall, 2 MPs stood guard in front of a holding cell. Inside, sitting cuffed to a bolted-down chair, was a man in a contractor's uniform. Standard khaki shirt and dark cargo pants, the kind worn by maintenance and civilian support staff. His hair was matted, a trickle of dry blood marking his temple. He looked up as they approached, his gaze settling on Leah with a strange, calculating interest. This, Hartley said, is our intruder. Leah stepped closer to the cell's reinforced glass. He doesn't look military. He's not. Clearance under a subcontract with one of our vendors. Background clean on paper. And yet, Hartley glanced toward the man. We caught him in Corridor 3B, moving toward Door 13 with a pack full of bypass tools and forged authorization tags. The man smiled faintly. "Impressive work on the door," he said to Leah through the glass. She didn't reply. "You know what was in that sector, don't you?" he went on, as if they were talking privately. "Why it's worth the risk." Hartley cut in sharply. "That's enough." But Leah didn't move her eyes from the man. "Why don't you tell me?" His smile widened. "Because you already know. You've been on the other side." The words hit like a quiet explosion. Hartley's gaze snapped to her. "Is that true?" Leah kept her voice even. "I've been a lot of places. None of them with him." The intruder chuckled. "Not with me, but with them. And they want it back." Hartley stepped closer to the glass. "Who is they?" Silence. The man leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded, as if the conversation had already served its purpose. Hartley signaled to the MPs. "Get him to interrogation." As the MPs moved in, the intruder looked past them to Leah one last time. "You're not done with this. Not by a long shot." The door shut behind them, the sound heavy in the stillness. Hartley turned to Leah. "What did he mean?" "I don't know," she said, but there was a tightness in her voice she couldn't quite hide. Hartley didn't call her on it. "I don't trust coincidences, Rains. You appear at my most secure door in the middle of a breach attempt by someone who knows your skill set. Either you're part of this, or you're the reason they thought it might work." "I'm neither," she said firmly. "I'm the reason it didn't." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Hartley said, "You're not going back to the mess hall." "I wasn't planning to." He started walking back toward the main corridor. "We have intel to dig up. You're going to help me find out who sent him and what they wanted from Sector 9. As they reached the intersection where the medical team was packing up, Mercer appeared from the opposite hall. "Commander wants a full sweep of the sublevels. Says someone else might still be down there." Hartley didn't slow. "Take Rains with you. She's on the team now." Mercer's brows lifted. "Just like that." "Just like that," Hartley said. "She knows more about our doors than anyone else on base." Mercer gave Leah a sideways glance as they fell into step. "Guess the kitchen's going to be quiet without you." "Guess so," she said. They reached the stairwell, leading deeper into the sublevels. The air grew warmer with each step, the hum of machinery louder. Mercer's radio crackled intermittently with updates from other sweep teams. Nothing yet, no sign of additional intruders. At the bottom of the stairs, the corridor split in two. Mercer motioned left, and they moved down a narrow hall lined with storage rooms. Each door was checked and cleared, the MPs moving with methodical precision. Halfway down the hall, Leah paused. "Hold up." "What?" Mercer asked. She pointed to a vent panel low on the wall. The screws were loose, two of them barely hanging in place. "That wasn't like that before." Mercer crouched, peering inside. The ductwork was dark, the faint smell of oil and metal drifting out. He clicked on his flashlight. A scrap of fabric lay just inside the vent, khaki, like the intruder's shirt. Mercer cursed softly. "We got a second." Leah's pulse quickened. "Where does this lead?" "Fuel room," Mercer said, already keying his radio. "Control. Sweep Team 3. Possible secondary infiltrator. Moving toward." Static cut him off. The radio hissed and went dead. Leah straightened. "They're jamming." Mercer looked at her, then toward the corridor ahead. "Then we move." They took off at a jog, the MPs close behind. The hall curved and narrowed, the red lights overhead casting their shadows long and jagged. At the end, a reinforced door stood ajar. Mercer reached it first, pushing it open. The fuel room was a cavernous space lined with massive cylindrical tanks, the air thick with the smell of diesel. Somewhere in a maze of pipes and catwalks, metal clanged against metal, a sound that didn't belong. Leah's eyes tracked the sound upward. On the second-level walkway, a figure in khaki crouched by a control panel, working quickly. "There," she pointed. The figure looked down, saw them, and bolted. Mercer and the MPs sprinted for the stairs, but Leah veered right, heading for the maintenance ladder on the far wall. She climbed fast, boots hitting the metal rungs with a steady rhythm. She reached the top just as the intruder turned a corner. She caught his sleeve, yanking him back hard. He swung at her, a wide, clumsy arc, but she ducked and drove her shoulder into his chest, slamming him against the railing. His hand hit the control panel in reflex, flipping a switch. Somewhere deep in the room, a warning siren began to blare. "What did you do?" she demanded. He grinned through clenched teeth, started the countdown. Below, Mercer was shouting orders. Leah tightened her grip. "Then you're going to tell me how to stop it." The siren wailed in long, piercing bursts that rattled the catwalk beneath Leah's boots. Red lights strobed along the fuel room walls, casting jagged shadows over the maze of tanks and pipes. The intruder thrashed against her grip, his grin carved into his face like he'd already won. "Countdown's live," he said, breathless. "Nothing you do now." She slammed him into the railing hard enough to make it shudder. "Where's the shutoff?" He laughed through a grimace. "Wouldn't matter if I told you." Below, Mercer and the MPs were moving fast, spreading out across the ground floor. "We got maybe 3 minutes." Mercer shouted up. 3 minutes. In this room, with this much fuel, that was 3 minutes to either prevent a fireball or join it. Leah yanked the intruder's arms behind him, snapping a zip tie from her apron pocket around his wrists. "Stay down," she growled, shoving him to the catwalk floor. She spun toward the control panel he'd been working on. The display was a mess of blinking error codes, the readouts flickering between temperature spikes and pressure drops. Somewhere in the tangle of information, the timer counted down from 2:46. She knew the setup, not exactly, but enough. Fuel storage rooms had layered safety systems, mechanical overrides built for emergencies. Whoever this was had bypassed them in a way that forced the automated purges offline, letting heat and pressure build toward catastrophic release. "Mercer," she called down, "we've got to cut the secondary feed before the fail-safe vents blow. The manual shut-off." "Already locked," he shouted back. "Keys are in the control booth." The control booth, a glass wall room on the far side of the tanks. Ground level. She could see it from here, dark except for the intermittent flash of alarms. Between her and it was a steel maze, crisscrossed with ladders and walkways. Leah didn't hesitate. She vaulted the nearest railing, landing on a lower walkway with a clang that echoed through the room. The siren vibrated in her bones as she ran, weaving between pipes, ducking under low beams. Every second, the timer in her head ticked lower. 2 minutes. She rounded a corner and froze. Another figure was moving to the shadows ahead. Not the man she caught, but someone else, dressed the same, khaki shirt, cargo pants, civilian contractor gear. This one carried a compact duffel slung across their chest, their gloved hands working at a junction valve. "Stop." Leah barked, voice sharp enough to cut through the siren. The figure bolted. She chased, boots pounding metal. The walkway twisted upward, the intruder leaping onto a ladder. Leah grabbed the side rails and followed, climbing 2 rungs at a time. At the top, he kicked backward, his boot catching her shoulder. Pain jolted through her arm, but she kept climbing. They reached another catwalk. He tried to shove past a narrow section between tanks, but she lunged, grabbing the duffel strap and yanking hard. The bag tore free, sending him stumbling forward. Mercer's voice bellowed from below, 1 minute. The intruder turned, desperation in his eyes. He swung a wrench from his belt at her head. She ducked, the metal whistling past her ear, and drove her knee into his ribs. He staggered, hitting the railing, and she shoved him down onto the grated floor. No time to secure him. She kicked the wrench away, snatched the duffel, and sprinted toward the control booth. 45 seconds. She hit the stairs at full speed, boots hammering down to ground level. Mercer was already there, standing guard at the booth door, rifle ready. "You've got the key?" he demanded. She dropped the duffel, pulled the contractor's ID badge from its side pocket, and scanned it against the booth's reader. The light flashed green. Inside, the booth smelled faintly of burnt wiring. Panels lined the walls, most of them lit with angry red LEDs. The main console sat in the center, its display showing the countdown at 0:37. Leah's eyes flicked over the controls. The intruder had disabled both digital and mechanical safeties, forcing the vent lines to stay shut while the system heated itself toward rupture. But they'd made one mistake, the oldest mistake in sabotage: redundancy. There was still one manual failsafe buried behind the pressure regulators. She grabbed the boost's heavy utility key from the wall hook and ran to the side panel. Unlocking it revealed the regulator assembly, two thick valves with override levers. She yanked the first, then the second. Both resisted, stuck from heat expansion. 30 seconds. She planted her boots and pulled harder. The first lever screamed as it gave way, spinning into release position. Steam hissed through the pipes, the temperature gauge dipping slightly. Mercer appeared at her side, grabbing the second lever. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They hauled together. The lever groaned, then snapped into place. The pressure drop was instant, the gauges spinning down towards safe zones. The countdown display froze at 0:08, then blinked out. The siren cut off mid-wail. The silence that followed was almost louder than the alarm had been. Leah leaned against the wall, breathing hard, sweat slicking her hairline. Mercer straightened, still holding the lever handle, then gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You just—" He broke off, shaking his head. "Hell reigns." She pushed off the wall. "Secure the second one. The guy upstairs. He's still breathing." Mercer keyed his radio. The signal had cleared and relayed orders to the MPs. Within moments, boots pounded up the ladders, shouts echoing as the second intruder was dragged down. Both were cuffed, searched, and marched out under heavy guard. Hartley arrived 10 minutes later, the calm in his stride at odds with the chaos still settling in the room. He took in the open valves, the duffel on the floor, and the restrained intruders before his gaze landed on Leah. "You stopped it," he said, not a question. "They tried to cook the tanks," she replied. "Would have taken out half the base." Hartley's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes now, the smallest crack in the granite. "You saved a lot of lives." "I wasn't on the roster," she said. "You are now," he replied. Mercer glanced between them. "Sir, we still don't know who sent them." Hartley nodded. "We'll know, and when we do, we'll need someone who can get places others can't." He looked at Leah. "That's you." Leah felt the weight of the moment. The recognition, the responsibility, and the risk all rolled into one. For years she'd stayed in the kitchen because it was safe, predictable. Now there was no going back. The MPs escorted the intruders away. Mercer walked beside her toward the exit, his voice quieter than usual. "You were right," he said, "about letting you do your job." She didn't smile, but the edge in her voice softened. "Glad you finally noticed." As they stepped out into the cooler air of the upper corridors, Leah looked back once at the fuel room. The red lights gone, the hum of machinery back to normal. For now, the danger was over. But the way the intruder had smiled at her before being taken away lingered like a shadow in the back of her mind. This wasn't finished. Not yet. The next 24 hours were a blur. The intruders were moved to secure a holding facility in Sector 4, under guards so tight even their shadows were accounted for. Hartley ordered a full security audit, pulling every clearance record for the last year. MP patrols doubled. Access to Sector 9 was reduced to 2 authorized personnel, both handpicked by him. Leah didn't go back to the mess hall. She stayed in the East Wing, answering Hartley's questions, giving a full account of how she'd opened Door 13, detailing every second of the fuel room incident. Each time she spoke, she could feel Mercer's eyes on her, not in challenge anymore, but in quiet acknowledgement. By the following morning, the base's internal network was alive with the story. It spread the way these things always did, not as a sterile report, but as whispered retellings in hallways, exaggerated at the edges. The kitchen captain who opened the impossible door. The woman who stopped the base from going up in smoke. Leah ignored most of it. Recognition had never been the point. Still, when she stepped into the debriefing room that afternoon, the conversation stopped. Officers and enlisted alike glanced her way, their eyes carrying a mix of curiosity, gratitude, and something new, respect. Hartley sat at the head of the table. "Rains," he said, gesturing to the seat beside him. It was a small thing, that empty chair, but she felt the shift in it. No longer shoved to the sidelines. She was at the table now. The meeting was brisk. Intelligence analysts confirmed the intruders were working for an unidentified external faction with prior knowledge of Sector 9's contents. Whatever they'd been after was still classified above Leah's clearance, but Hartley assured the room that its security had been reinforced. When the others filed out, Hartley stayed seated. "You didn't just stop them," he said. "You stopped them twice. Without you, this base would be a smoking crater. I can't ignore that." Leah studied him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you out of the kitchen and into a position where your skills are used. Officially." "Doing what?" "Special security liaison," he said. "You'll report directly to me. No red tape. If there's a breach, a lock, a system no one else can crack, you're the first call." Leah leaned back. "And when there's nothing crack?" Hartley's mouth quirked. "Then you'll still have an office, a badge, and a pay grade that reflects what you're worth. But something tells me you won't be idle for long." She didn't answer right away. Part of her, the part that had found a kind of safety in anonymity, hesitated. But the other part, the one that had knelt in front of door 13 without doubt or fear, knew the decision was already made. "All right," she said. "I'll do it." Hartley nodded once. "Good. We'll handle the paperwork." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "And Rains." She looked up. "Don't make me regret it." The official change came faster than she expected. Within 48 hours, she had a new badge, new access codes, and an office 2 floors above the mess hall. It wasn't large, just a desk, a secure terminal, and a locked cabinet for equipment. But it was hers. On her first morning in the new role, Mercer showed up in the doorway. He leaned on the frame, arms crossed, wearing a grin that was more self-aware than cocky this time. "Thought I'd check in on the boss," he said. She arched a brow. "I'm not your boss." "You outranked me on the important stuff now," he said. "Like who gets through the locked doors." She allowed herself a faint smile. "And you? You still think I belong in the kitchen?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. I just hope the rest of the base catches up as fast as I did." He pushed off the frame and left without waiting for a reply, but she noticed he walked out with a lighter step than usual. That afternoon, she took a walk down to the mess hall. It was strange stepping back into the space as a visitor. The air was the same. The smell of baked bread, the hum of the soda dispenser, the clatter of trays. But the eyes that turned toward her now didn't carry the dismissive glances they once had. Lutz spotted her first, nearly dropping a stack of plates in her excitement. "Captain," she blurted, then corrected herself. "Ma'am. Or what do I call you now?" "Leah's fine," she said. "Word is you got your own office now," Lutz said, grinning. "And you get to carry the cool access cards." Leah chuckled. "Something like that." She stayed just long enough to grab a coffee, nod to a few familiar faces, and step back out. She hadn't come for attention. She'd come to remind herself that the kitchen was still there, a quiet constant in a place where most things shifted fast. That evening, Hartley called at his office. "Sit," he said. "We've had another development." He slid a slim folder across the desk. Inside was a grainy surveillance still. The second intruder from the fuel room, his face partially shadowed. Next it was a photo from 6 years ago. Same man, different name. Leah stared at it, her chest tightening. She remembered the mission, not all the details, but enough to know he'd been there, on the opposite side. "He knew you," Hartley said. "Yes," she admitted. Hartley's voice was quiet. "This isn't over. Whoever sent him will try again." She closed the folder. "Then we'll be ready." Hartley's eyes met hers. "We will." 2 days later, the base returned to something like normal. The blinking panel above the east wing was dark again. Soldiers moved through the corridors without glancing over their shoulders. The lockdown drills were still tighter, the MPs more alert, but the edge of immediate danger had dulled. For Leah, the change was sharper. She no longer moved invisibly through the base. People nodded to her now. Some even saluted. The whispers weren't about the kitchen captain anymore. She'd been given clearance to walk anywhere, including past door 13. On her first pass, she slowed, letting her fingers brush the cool steel. It stood silent, sealed, but not untouchable. Not to her. A guard on post glanced at her. "Something you need, ma'am?" "Just looking," she said, stepping back, and maybe, in a way, making a promise. The following week, Hartley had her sit in on a classified security review. The room was filled with people whose titles carried more weight than she'd ever held before. She said little, listened more, but when the conversation turned to breach prevention, she spoke up calmly, clearly, outlining flaws she'd spotted in the current protocols. When she finished, the room was quiet for a beat. Then one of the colonels nodded slowly. "She's right," he said. "We should implement that." Hartley didn't smile, but there was a faint shift in his posture, a satisfaction he didn't need to voice. Later that day, Leah returned to her office to find a single envelope on her desk. Inside was a small card. No name, no signature, just 4 words in the same blocky handwriting as the note that had started it all. "You did well. For now." She stared at it for a long time. The war, whatever form it was taking, wasn't over. This had been one battle. There would be others, but she was ready for them now. That night, she walked the perimeter of the base alone, the stars sharp above the dark outlines of the buildings. When she reached the mess hall, she stopped, looking through the wide front windows. Inside, soldiers laughed, ate, argued over card games, unaware how close they'd come to losing it all. She didn't need them to know. She stepped away, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path, and made her way toward the east wing, past the guard station, past the quiet corridors, past door 13, which stood in its eternal stillness. She paused there, just for a second, pressing her palm lightly against the steel. It was cool under her touch, but in her mind, she could feel the echo of the day it had opened for her again. Not because someone ordered it, but because she decided it would. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that wouldn't be the last time. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.